Welcome to Ecologic for the month of February. Beautiful time of the year in Louisiana. The azaleas, camellias are all blooming. Azaleas is just coming in. I hope they're still here for the azalea trail coming up, I think in early March.
March 17th.
March 17th. Probably all be gone by then. But anyway, beautiful time of the year. We have as our guest, Catherine Como, who's one of the founders of No Waste Lafayette. So tell us, Catherine, what No Waste Lafayette's all about.
No Waste Lafayette, it came about somewhat around the time when Lafayette was getting a new waste contract, and there were lots of things we had issue with. A few of us started this group, and it's an environmental education organization that works with individuals, businesses, and the government to reduce needless and avoidable waste. And some of our goals are to promote what's called zero waste, to promote zero waste amongst individuals, communities, neighborhoods. And zero waste, it's an old idea, it's ancient, some might say, and it's come full circle. It encourages redesign so that all resources are reused. It means that we don't send any trash to the landfill or an incinerator, and it looks at resources and how nature reuses what it consumes. Like a tree falls, a tree as it's living, it produces shade, it produces shelter, and then it dies and it produces nutrients to produce more trees. So zero waste asks us to look at our production of products and see if we can't mimic those natural life cycles and not create something that we have to either burn or bury to get rid of. The official definition of zero waste is kind of a lengthy one, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says zero waste is a goal that is ethical, economical, efficient, and visionary to guide people in changing their lifestyles and practices to emulate sustainable natural cycles, where all discarded materials are designed to become resources for others to use. Zero waste means designing and managing products and processes to systematically avoid and eliminate the volume and toxicity of waste and materials, conserve and recover all resources, and not burn or bury them. Implementing zero waste will eliminate all discharges to land, water, or air that are a threat to planetary, human, animal, or plant life. Short of it is, No Waste Lafayette tries to reduce waste. And that's something that Lafayette has been doing for several decades now. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of how Lafayette has been reducing its waste since the 70s, the 80s.
One of the initial battles for waste in Lafayette was tied to the Vermilion Bayou and the pollution that was in it. If you put a white boat in the water and rode around a little bit, you had a black water line that really was oil. And so the oil sheen started somewhere around the Surrey Bridge, and the Sierra Club here in Lafayette got really busy and seeing where that sheen came from, and we heard stories like it's waste oil from north of the parish in St. Martin Parish at the Hanslow Butte oil field, at the Cankton Wells, and we tracked all that down. There's no oil coming out of there at all. It all started in Lafayette. So we homed in on the filling stations. There were 54 stations in town, in the city, that changed oil in trucks and cars. And so there were only 2 of them that recycle oil. Now, this was in the 70s when the price of gasoline was going up like crazy. It was going up to 60 and 70 cents, from 25 cents. So, and oil went from $3 a barrel to $30 or $40 a barrel. So now oil was becoming a lot more valuable, to the point that companies were being set up in the state to recycle the oil, the waste oil from engines and from lawnmowers or whatever you change oil with. And So we met with the Filling Station Association and the plumbing contractor and the recycler, and they described what you needed. You needed a tank to receive it, and they also would take ethylene glycol coolant, which is really toxic material, but you could put it in the same tank with oil, which solved another problem of getting rid of, in a safe way, antifreeze. So anyway, after 6 months and meeting with the Filling Station Association, only 2 more stations complied. So now instead of having 54 stations in town that dump the oil, no telling where,
52.
we had 52. So come to find out, they were dumping it in the storm drains, which means they were going right to the bayou.
Straight to the bayou Vermilion.
So I was in City Hall fooling around, and I just happened to be looking through the city's fire code, and there it was. It said there would be no dumping of into the storm drains of Lafayette waste oil, diesel fuel, gasoline, and a whole list of bad stuff that could cause an explosion and a fire. And I read it and I said, wow, I bet the fire marshal would love to have this. So I scooted over to the fire marshal's office and I said, does this mean waste oil from filling stations? Well, absolutely. I said, here's the names and addresses of 52 stations that are dumping their waste oil in the storm drains. That's going to end. So they gave them 30 days to comply, inspected afterwards, and after the inspection, after 30 days, Lafayette was totally recycling all its waste oil. Now, it didn't deal with things like people who change oil themselves, but a bunch of the stations on a volunteer basis offered to take this oil. You had to put it in a waste milk jug, a 1 gallon jug, and you could bring it to them. And if you change antifreeze, you could bring that to them, of course, which was good for them. It brought to your station. You might buy gas from them or something else from them, but also it allowed them to do a good deed for the community. And they were selling it, so they were getting paid for it. They were getting paid about 30 cents a gallon for it. And it was a significant amount of revenue because typical station was producing 1,000 gallons a week of waste oil.
Right.
And so it amounted to a bunch of money at the end of the month. That was just waste. So that was a real victory. It was the first major city in the South that did that,
And then people learn of ways they can recycle their own oil at home if they're changing their own oil, and it keeps it, like you said, keeps it out of the bayou. Other things that help are when the bayou, when the stormwater drains get painted, with to some of us is obvious that it does drain to the bayou, but it is not necessarily obvious to everyone that this does not go to our sewer treatment plant.
Right.
Which leads us to another topic on the history of waste and diverting waste through the sewer plant.
Okay.
The sewer, of course, handles everybody's waste, and that waste produces water and a solid. It's called biosolids or sewer sludge.
Right.
And in the past, Lafayette was simply,
Landfilling.
boiling off the wastewater, evaporating it as they were able, and then the biosolids or the sewer sludge was being sent to the landfill until
we set up a bill with the help of business people in Lafayette who own pasture land, were anxious to get a hold of this material. And we patterned the legislation which went to the state of Louisiana on an Oregon bill that did the same thing, and it guaranteed that you took the material as it came from the sewer plant in the 5% solid liquid form in big tank trucks with super big tires. You've probably seen them rolling around town. And they go and spray this material on hayland. It's usable for other agricultural purposes, but there are very tight restrictions on how long you can put it on the land, and then how many. You have to wait 2 years for any crop that contacts the land, like cucumbers or, watermelons, so forth, and then, but tomatoes, it's a year, and so there was a lot of stiff rules, but for the hay crops, there really was minimal rules. You couldn't get within 100 feet of your neighbor's property when you're spraying it, and there's a lot of, and then the key thing is, it had to be, the material has to meet the priority pollutant standard. So every day the material has to be tested for mercury and lead and arsenic and all these bad items that could be in the sewer system. And when we set this up, we looked at Lafayette and thought, wow, there's no problem. Our stuff's gonna test perfect the first day. It took almost a year to clear out the fact that the chemistry labs at all the high schools and at colleges were dumping all their waste down the drain, mercury, you name it. So they had to pass rules against that. Then we had bumper recombing operations that were putting 40 or 50 pounds of mercury a day in the sewer systems, which adds up to a lot in the whole system. So
yeah,
this detected a lot of problem chemicals that had to be eliminated for us to operate this sewer sludge. It is very, we produced in Lafayette at the time was over 100 tons a day at a cost of about $80 a ton a day, 30 days per year. So you start adding this all up, and it's very expensive to get rid of and damaging to landfill potentially. And the fact that the chemicals, which are not treated by sewer treatment, were going straight into the pipe. So
right.
now that they set up a detection system, that if someone dumped bad stuff, the detection system would bring us to the drain that it was dumped in.
And that it's something we like to often remind people as Noise Lafayette. We like to ask the question, where is a way? We get the feeling that we can just dump something down our toilet and it goes away. Dump something down our drain and it just goes away. Put it in the garbage can and it goes away. But the thing is, what goes down your toilet is ending up in a sewer treatment plant. And if it is not strained out and goes to the fertilizer program, it's going into the bayou. Or if it is a dangerous pollutant, it has to be treated. I guess it has to be disposed of as a hazardous waste.
Yeah, and that's the issue, that it's very expensive to do that. Now, to the people who make hay, and it's virtually all going on hay land, it's in very high demand. There's a waiting list. The hay production is increased by 600% on typical land. So if you're making 50 bales per acre, you're gonna make 300 bales per acre.
But I bet if you ask anyone in town if they know where what they put down the toilet goes, not a one of them could give you the details. But now you know it's going to grow hay and to put more water in the Bayou Vermilion. That is clean water according to the tests that are done on it. And we hope.
The next big recycling issue, besides yard waste recycling, was yard waste. And there was lots of unknowns about that.
Right, and you're talking about the issues of what I wanted to mention was that this was all going on, getting the yard waste out of our waste stream was going on in the late 1980s. I believe this is when Lafayette started feeling the pressure. There were several landfills around town that were being shut down, and we were starting to look at having to to truck our waste to other locations, to other landfills.
To Jefferson Davis Parish.
And so the heavier your truck, the more you're going to pay to have to get it to.
Right. And yard waste
in this case now Jefferson Davis Parish.
Yeah.
So yard waste was something they looked at getting out.
It was a super big problem because you get the leaves and grass and branches, you haul in mostly air. The most you could put in a big truck that normally would handle 50 tons of material was 14 tons. So you're making lots of trips just hauling air, So we looked at this yard waste composting and how does it work, and to the credit of the people of Lafayette and the administration, I think it was Douglas Straps at the time, sent his people to look at these compost facilities all over the country, and none of them worked. We looked at, in Indiana, we looked at leaves that had been stacked for 20 years, and the bottom of the stack was still leaves. I said, wow, that's not gonna work. So we struck on the idea of tub grinding everything. And to our astonishment, the result was you had 90% reduction the day you got it, which is very significant because in that reduced form, it can be sold as biomass fuel. And a significant part of our yard waste is still being sold as biomass fuel. Yeah, about 90 days that it can be sold as biomass
Right,
fuel for steam production.
it's being sold, I believe, at this point to a paper mill in North Louisiana.
In Pineville.
And which in a zero waste philosophy is not the best use of our yard waste, because what we do know is that our soils need the yard waste to replenish their viability for growing crops, for remaining healthy, for remaining drought free. And so all that yard waste in a zero waste philosophy that is being sold to burn, to run a paper mill, is not the best use of that yard waste.
But it is reused.
It is reused, yes.
But I don't know what percentage, but then the rest of it in 6 months, it is available on a free basis to any resident that wants it. Contractors included. And so this is a wonderful material to put in your garden, to, put in places where you want to grow grass, and lots of very, very good uses at no cost.
Yes, and however, there are a few issues with the product. And a few issues that No Waste Lafayette would like to push for somehow changing. We at No Waste Lafayette, we recommend that if you are putting your yard waste out to the curb, you do not put it out in a black plastic bag. Because while the city compost facility does try to get those black plastic bags out of the big truck before it goes to the tub grinder, they are not always successful. And so the end product has plastic trash in it. And another thing we'd like to push for is that all of Lafayette Consolidated Government facilities would utilize this mulch to mulch their flower beds, also to mulch our streetscape programs. Currently, in the Lafayette budget, there is a line item for each facility that allows that facility to buy bagged mulch from a provider, be it Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever they get their mulch. While we have a free product that sits, and I say free, but we've paid to make it, it is investment of tax dollars that makes this product. And we say at No Waste Lafayette, let's bring it full circle. Let's use it, and let's avoid paying somebody to go harvest trees in Canada to bring us mulch in a bag. But the product does need a little improvement. We need to get those little black plastic bags out of it.
Yep.
And it could be ground a little finer, but those are things that once the product is being used and the facility gets the feedback, there would be more pressure for improving it. That's the hope.
And this is, it's a very significant part of the waste stream. It's around 35% of the waste stream. When this was being put together, we were at 500 tons a day. And when you look at this, 160, 170 tons wasn't going to the landfill. At the same time, we're doing sewer waste. That was 100 to 125 tons. Both of those things you don't readily see, but made an enormous impact on what ended up in the landfill. That was 55% reduction.
Wow, and at the same time,
that saved landfill space and life.
That was the same time that Lafayette was also starting its initial curbside recycling program,
which is 10% of the waste stream. So you put those together, and you're at 65%.
Yeah.
So you only have a third left, which is hauled to a neighboring parish, Jefferson Davis Parish, about 60 miles away. But we're not hauling so much, and we're not hauling air. And so it's very, very, it's a strong statement of environmental success for this community and should be copied by other communities. We pioneered the concept of tub grind in the yard waste, and it's a super success story. It should be done. We produce 150 tons a day. Houston produces around 5,000 to 6,000 tons a day, and it's a third of their waste. The important thing is they could do the same thing that we do. It's very economical. It puts people to work, provides jobs, and does the right thing with the product.
And could provide a product for the city to use on its own facilities.
On its own, as well as the gardens and everything else. And so Lafayette sets a model for other communities.
Yep, and I'd like to talk a little bit about recycling in Lafayette when it first started. We had source separation recycling when we first started. That's when everybody got the separate 3 bins, and we were asked to put, aluminum,
metal, paper,
aluminum,
cardboard,
paper,
and plastic.
And then plastic, and eventually they added glass to the plastic bin, I believe. And that was started by a private nonprofit entity.
Yeah.
What was the Recycling Foundation, I believe.
A startup company here in Lafayette, and their bid was 0. And that was a 5-year contract. They turned out a 0 bid and under a 5-year contract. And very successful. The company prevailed and succeeded. It merged with another company in Baton Rouge that kind of set up the same program. This is complex in terms of economics because recycling markets constantly change as the price of oil changes. A lot of things happen. The worst thing that happen to recycling, the price of oil goes down. It makes recycling plastic less profitable. And so that's always in the mix, and glass is in the same thing. The big problem with glass is it's very heavy.
The weight in
and
transporting
the
it.
cost of moving around is very expensive, and that's problematic. It makes it non-profitable to do. And we faced that in the initial Lafayette program and found out that there's a glass plant in Monroe, and it costs us about $15 a ton to send it to Monroe, and they would pay us $6 a ton. We found out we could send it to Waco, Texas for $4 a ton, and they paid us $6, which made it profitable. And that's recycling really turns on the issue of economics and profitability.
Yeah, but another issue with glass is the market for the product. Like especially now what we have, we don't have source separation recycling anymore. Of course, we now have what's called single stream recycling. And often when we were recycling glass, the glass would get dirty, it would get mixed in with other things, and the end product, which when it's all ground up into a smaller bit, it's called cullet. And that glass cullet they don't necessarily always have a market for it, especially if it's dirty glass cullet. If it could be kept separate, and even better, it would be to keep the colors separate, then the value of the cullet goes up. But I definitely think there is a need for figuring out ways to utilize glass closer to where it's produced, and that I think is what's going to be the pressure in recycling. With yard waste, we keep it in Lafayette, except for, of course, the stuff that goes to be used as a fuel. But the stuff that stays here to replenish the soil, it doesn't have to be trucked very far. And I think that's key to a lot of the other recyclables, is to have the means to recycle them closer, so you're not wasting fuel cost on getting them to where they need to be for recycling. But Lafayette has lots of ways to divert waste besides just through our municipal government and the contracts we have for curbside collection or yard waste collection. We have thrift stores where you can get rid of furniture, clothing, textiles. Textile waste is a huge global problem because we have fashions that change so quickly now, and people quickly get rid of their clothing. because it's cheaply made or it falls out of fashion, and that can take up a lot of landfill space. So you have your places like your Goodwill, your Salvation Army, the Hand Up thrift store, and for waste like furniture and hardware, of course, we have Habitat Restore. There's a new place opening downtown called DUZMV Creative, and they'll be taking art supplies to resell to the public. Your e-waste can go to a lot of your big box stores,
Electronic
like
waste,
your electronic
your phones
waste,
and computers.
your telephones, your batteries, and it's not technically electronic waste, but things like these new CFL light bulbs, all those are not supposed to go in your typical trash can. That should go back to the store where you bought it. Typically, Home Depot, Lowe's, they have a bin where you can throw that, and the chemicals in there can be properly treated. Also, speaking of chemicals, our government hosts the Household Chemical Waste Days, which are a huge plus for the landfill and keeping it clean, keeping all those chemicals out of there. Things like paint and use motor oil and fertilizers that you may not be using, that can all be disposed of at these Household Chemical Waste Days. And I believe there's one coming up in April. I'm not sure of the date.
I think it is April.
But another thing that you can recycle, not necessarily curbside, but at your grocery stores, you can bring back plastic film. Almost everything you buy has a plastic film around it. Toilet paper, paper towels, toys, whatever you might be buying. A lot of it comes with a plastic film. And that can all be bundled up and taken to grocery stores for recycling. Something that the Bayou Vermilion District is getting ready to implement is a food waste composting program at their restaurant, La Cuisine de Maman. And that is something that Lafayette does not currently do on a household, municipal-wide level. We only compost yard waste. But what the Bayou Vermilion District is hoping to do is to have a program there through their restaurant to compost food waste. They will be purchasing an in-vessel composter. It's called the Rocket. It's a big tube that is going to take the food waste from the restaurant, and along with city compost, because you have to add a bulking agent, it's going to turn that food waste into a nutrient-rich soil amendment that will then be put on the grounds at the Bayou Vermilion District to sort of show how food waste composting can be done close to home. And it can eliminate a lot of what we are trucking to Welsh, or what parish is that we have our Jefferson Davis Parish landfill. Another thing that Lafayette has going on as far as waste reduction is we have a university that has a very good sustainability program and a waste reduction program. They have campus-wide recycling. And they also have, I forget the name of the program, but it's something whereby the students, when they're leaving their dormitories and they're getting rid of a bookshelf or a lamp, they have somewhat of a swap shop, I believe, that goes on where incoming students can either buy or get for free, I'm not sure, these items, so they don't end up in the landfill and students don't go buy more, creating more and more waste.
It's worth mentioning that the oil companies face this in the Gulf of Mexico. Years ago in the middle 80s, they set up a beach week program, which was cleaning the beaches, and everybody had a lot of fun with it. But it homed in on the fact that a lot of the waste was coming from offshore platforms. So the oil companies, to their credit, really went all out to reduce waste. And they made a bunch of rules that dealt with contracts. For instance, these seismograph vessels pull boomers. They had 4 little nose cones that were used one day pulling, and then they would pitch them. Well, they ended up all over the beaches, and oil companies' names were all over it.
What are they? What nose cones?
They were nose cones for boomers on seismograph boats.
Wait, what are boomers?
that the noise making the voice devices that they record the noise and they do seismograph
Oh, okay,
analysis.
okay.
Where the oil is, so to speak, where the salt domes are. But the oil company responded with that saying, you take 200 boomers out on your seismograph vessels, they all have to be numbered and they all have to come back. And it was part of the contract.
What were they made of? What was the
They
material?
they were fiberglass.
Fiberglass.
About twice the size of a basketball, and bulletproof. Man, you couldn't sink them, and they were all over the place on the beaches, and they wouldn't break. They'd last forever. And so then they found out the same thing was happening with batteries. When they go change the batteries for all the lights and the horns and everything, the people bringing them would pitch them overboard. Well, the batteries would wash up on the beaches. You can imagine how heavy a battery is, and it washes up on the beaches. But they found out it was a lot more expensive to pick up the battery than to recycle it. So by contract, they set up rules. If you brought a new battery, the old battery had to come back to land or you didn't get paid. And batteries are all recyclable. And then they passed rules that they quit using throwaway plates. And they went to stainless steel everything in their kitchens, and they went to aluminum containers for soft drinks and so forth. And there was such an extensive resource that ExxonMobil in Morgan City would recycle the aluminum, bring it all back to land, and it amounted to $10,000 to $12,000 a month, which teachers in St. Mary Parish could apply for a $3,000 grant. They could apply every month.
Wow.
So all this recycling money went back into the community as a teacher's aid thing. So we learned that, reuse, you can avoid waste by managing the inflow, doing away with it to start with.
Yeah, designing and
plan ahead.
making contracts to
And
enforce it. And any place where you have this like microcosm that, like out on an oil rig where, there are definite rules that have to be followed. Just like on UL's campus, they've got definite rules, and it's got this small little world where things can be controlled. And time again, it proves to be profitable, beneficial, and a win-win situation for all.
Beach sweep, a lot of people still love to hike the beaches, and my scout troop does that. And last month, every year we take a beach trip backpacking on the beach in Cameron Parish. And of course they got litter from the world washed up on the beaches. But one of the things we do is take a 35-foot strip of beach at random and count everything in it. And usually you'll have in 35 feet, you'll have 35 to 40 plastic bottles, a lot of them water bottles, 8 or 10 aluminum items, and then you'll have things like the styrofoam, everything, plates, and you name it, and shoes. There's usually 7 or 8 shoes, flip-flops of all kinds, and then cigarette lighters and pens, and a whole list of things. And this past January, to our astonishment, we had 7 pieces of plastic container cups, plastic water bottles mainly, 2 pieces of styrofoam, 1 shoe. The numbers were all way down, and I don't know what to attribute to that too, but
a mini tidal wave came and
big
cleared
wave
it
came
off
and
just
washed it all
before you
over,
got
right,
there.
Yeah, right. But the point is that we found a trash bag at Chenier River Teague, hiking with the scouts, and opened it up, and it came from St. Louis, Missouri. I mean, it was the kitchen mail, and I took a picture of it and got the address from one of the envelopes and mailed it back to the guys. I said, if you wonder where your trash ended up, this is on the beach of Vermilion Parish, Louisiana. Gave the date and all, and I never hear anything about it, but I'm sure he got.
Wasn't too concerned about getting it back.
Right.
The beaches tell us a lot about what people are throwing away.
That's a whole issue of putting waste where it doesn't belong, that's taking the waste and chunking it out of the car, or throwing it, and that adds a black eye to our area. It's a black eye for the environment to drive down the road and see all the waste beer cans and, whatever furniture people throw, their couches, their tires, and all kinds of stuff that has no place out there. And tires are terrible because a tire out in nature will reproduce mosquitoes much better than a swamp, like 400% better. So, man, if you don't want mosquitoes, don't let tires hang around. They're really bad. They're ideal atmosphere. Mosquitoes are protected. They're nice and warm in there. Nothing bothers them. There's no frogs or fish that'll eat them. And so a lot of these things just doesn't make good sense. We can, white goods, you can put them on the side, make a call, the city or parish government, they'll come pick it up for you.
Yeah, and the city allows you to throw away, I believe, 4 tires per month or year. I forget which, but you are allowed. There is a place you can bring them, no questions asked. You just bring your waste tires. You'd have to contact the recycling division to find out the details. But the thing about this stuff that ends up in the ditches and then in the coulees and the bayous and then Vermilion Bay is that these plastics, especially the plastics, they photodegrade. They break down into little bitty pieces that we know attract the chemicals in the water.
Yes, I want to know, is this no waste Louisiana? Where else is it being done in Louisiana? And is that something that we can get some practices from?
No Waste Lafayette started, we were inspired by New Orleans. There's a No Waste New Orleans, and we actually, together with No Waste New Orleans, we formed No Waste Louisiana, which is the umbrella group, a statewide organization. Here, No Waste Lafayette, we meet monthly, except for in April and December. But we have a meeting March 15th at the Downtown Public Library at 6 p.m. And we bat around ideas about how to change policies and how to educate people. And another event that's happening that you can learn about zero waste is a class that's going to be taking place at the new Omni Center downtown. And that class is called Zero Waste Lafayette 101. It's being taught by Cameron Broussard. And she, the date, oh goodness, I think it might be March 14th. I'm not certain of that date. You'd have to check online to get a specific date for that. But it'll be a class where she'll teach you some ways that you can personally reduce your waste and avoiding plastics, avoiding things that are just not necessary. And so that would be a good way to get some information, as well as coming to our meeting on March 15th.
And do you have a website?
We have a Facebook page at this point.
Okay.
Yes, so it's No Waste Lafayette. No Waste Lafayette.
And where do you meet?
We meet at the Downtown Public Library on the 3rd floor.
Great. Thank you for doing this. I think it's wonderful.
Good.
Your mom.
Yeah, great. A faithful listener she is. So. It's worth pointing out that, a lot of the plastic containers or single-use material.
Right, and what before we got our caller, what I was talking about was how these plastics, they photodegrade, which means the light breaks them into little bitty pieces that then, especially once they're in the water, they've been known to attract pollutants that are in the water, and then a small fish will ingest them. A larger fish will ingest the smaller fish. And then these plastics, along with the chemicals they've attracted in the water, they bioaccumulate in the fatty tissue of these fish that we then consume. And so we consume the ill effects of the chemicals that are attached to these plastics that the fish are eating. So litter takes on a different meaning when you consider that it's getting into our food chain. It's not just ugly. it's not just a blight to the community, it's affecting our health if it's getting into our food chain. And it's just one of the many reasons we should avoid the single-use plastics as much as possible.
One of the things, examples of reuse that works very well, and is for camping and so forth, is to take those plastic milk jugs or bottles, a lot of stuff comes in plastic, and fill it with water and put it in your freezer. And that ends up in your, it could be in your backpack container, or it could be in a small ice chest if you're canoeing. And it not only is keeping everything cold without ice melting and saturating everything with water, but as it melts, it becomes your drinking water. And it eliminates the spending a lot of money on ice. You know, every time you go fishing, you can spend, 10, 15 bucks on ice. And with this process, you're reusing the containers over and over and again, and so very few plastic bottles around the house get thrown away. They end up as reusable containers over and over again to make ice and drinking water at the same time. And no better drinking water coming from melting ice in a good drinking container.
I had talked about some of our goals at the beginning of the show, and another one of our goals with No Waste Lafayette is to push for a better waste management contract in the city of Lafayette. The contract we are currently under is going to be up for renewal or expiration in 2023. And so we are taking this long amount of time, since we're only 2018, to start educating not only the public, but educating our city council members and educating City Hall about what waste diversion and waste reduction looks like. One thing that we did last year was we did an informal waste assessment at City Hall. We looked at what they were throwing away, what they were producing, and we made some recommendations. And some of those recommendations they have already implemented. They reinstated recycling. That was first on the agenda, since they had lost their recycling services in the renewal of the contract. They made sure that they reinstated that. And another thing that they did was, instead of providing styrofoam cups for guests to use when they're having coffee at City Hall, they replaced the styrofoam cups with ceramic mugs. That they have also installed a dishwasher to be able to sanitize. They also signed up with a local big box store that takes back ink cartridges and toner cartridges. All of these items, even at home, they should not go in your garbage. They should go back to where you got them, so they can either be recycled or properly disposed of, since they are a hazardous chemical. But so we're excited that that City Hall has implemented some of these things, and we look for them to make even more improvements. Another thing that No Waste Lafayette has worked with is the local school district to implement recycling in the schools. And just this year, they were able to expand the recycling program to all of the school sites and school buildings. Last year, they were only about at half capacity, and they were able to recycle 38.3 tons of material that would have gone to the landfill. It's a lot of paper, a lot of metal coming from the kitchen, and so that's been a real plus for those children to not only be involved in the process of recycling, but to be a part of the solution of waste reduction in our town. Another.
You might talk about the challenges of Mardi Gras and Festival.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. You're talking about these microcosms, like offshore and on UL's campus and in the school district of Lafayette Parish School System. Another microcosm where we can all do better is in the festivals. Festival International and Festivals Acadia and Creole have recycling on site, and that's been through a program that the Bayou Vermilion District has been able to provide these services. They provide the trash cans and the recycling cans for these festivals. Along with Lafayette Consolidated Government, they add in some of their recycling bins. But this is a place where we get people from all the smaller communities from around the world, and it's where we all come together and say, hey, we're gonna have a good time, but also when we go to pitch our stuff, we're going to be conscientious of how we do it. We're going to recycle. And No Waste Lafayette has been working with Festival Acadien et Creole to make sure that in, I think, this upcoming festival, they have committed to phasing out totally styrofoam products. Styrofoam is a nasty product to make, and then once you're done with it, it's a flyaway product. It easily gets away from you. Even if you put it in the right place, it easily gets back out into the environment. And it especially doesn't have place at our festivals. We can do better. And like I said, it's the Bayou Vermilion District that is able to provide those recycling containers through a grant they wrote through Keep Louisiana Beautiful, I believe.
And those are available for events besides the ones that meet?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. If you have a large event or even a small event, I've called the Bayou Vermilion District for 2 sets of their cans, and they're actually not cans; they're more of a
They work really
wire system. But they will provide them for you as they are able for events both small and large if you'd like to incorporate recycling in your event. Something that Project Front Yard initiated this year at the Crew of Rio parade was a big success in diverting waste at the beginning of that parade. That night that the parade was setting up over at Pontiac Point, there were several volunteers with Project Front Yard, myself included, and we ran up and down the parade route, not the route, that just at Pontiac Point, and we collected cardboard boxes and plastic film. At the end of the night, we had diverted 4,600 pounds of cardboard from the waste stream. That all went for recycling. Almost 400 pounds of plastic film were diverted. Those will go to a company that produces a plastic lumber that can be used for outdoor decking or outdoor benches. And think about that, 400 pounds of plastic film. Do you know how much that has to be to, like, plastic is not that heavy. That's a lot of plastic film. We diverted about 85% of typically landfilled waste from the start of the parade. We then followed the parade collecting Mardi Gras beads, and we were able to collect 5,300 pounds of Mardi Gras beads that were turned over to LARC, where they reuse and resell them. So that was a huge success in diverting the waste. And I believe I've heard rumor that there is consideration that this should be mandatory for all parades, not just the Crew of Rio, that everyone should consider diverting their waste, especially that beginning of the parade when they're unboxing and unbagging all the beads.
Yeah, because it's when they leave, those folks leave, they sure leave a mess behind. It looks awful. And that should be, and somebody goes pick it up, but it shouldn't be picked up afterwards. There's a cost related to that, and it can be avoided just putting it in the right place when it's generated.
And if it's a calm evening, all those little plastic baggies, they kind of stay in place. But if there's any bit of a breeze, they're gone. They're gone into people's yards.
If they get wet.
They're gone into the storm drains. And yes, correct, if they get wet out on the street, then the machinery that the city uses to pick them up is pretty much ineffective, because it'll start getting gummed up with the wet, sticking bags, and it becomes more man hours, or they get loose and they go down the storm drains. Yeah.
But, the Festival International initiated, recycling and intensive placement of garbage receptacles, which is maintained by volunteers. These things fill up, people won't go up to fill a bin and
Right.
they'll just dump it on the ground. So volunteers, scouts, and UL, students volunteer their time to maintain these things and keep them where they emptied and so forth. So credit to Lafayette and the people who organized Festival International and Festival of Cajun Creole. Both of those events have very extensive garbage recycling activities taking place.
Yes, and now festival, as I was saying, Festivals of Cayenne and Creole is looking at reducing on the front end, like I said, getting rid of that styrofoam and using better products that could potentially be composted. Another thing I want to mention that No Waste Lafayette is involved in November last year, we hosted at the Habitat Restore, along with Project Front Yard, we hosted a Fix-It Cafe. It was where we had several experienced volunteer fixers ready and available to fix something that might have ended up in the landfill. We fixed vacuums, we fixed furniture, we fixed popcorn maker. I think we did. We fixed bicycles, and it was a big success in keeping a lot of those items out of the landfill. We are scheduled to have another Fix-It Cafe focused on clothing and leather goods, and that's going to be April 22nd at Vermilionville for the Bayou Vermilion District's Earth Day celebration. So that's going to be another Fix-It Cafe on April 22nd at Vermilionville. Another thing, we get a lot of questions calling ourselves No Waste Lafayette. We get a lot of questions about the curbside recycling contract that Lafayette has. And like I said, that is one of our goals, to hopefully get a better contract when it's up for renewal. And one of the ideas we've tossed around about making waste diversion better in Lafayette is, because we get a lot of questions, why, I live in an apartment, why can't I recycle? And the answer to that question is that your apartment is owned by someone who chooses not to pay for recycling. You know, as an apartment dweller, you are not included in the curbside collection contract. And one idea that has been batted around is that we could make recycling mandatory for for anyone who lives in the city. We already mandate that apartment complexes properly dispose of their garbage. There's nothing to say that it couldn't also be mandated that the definition of properly disposing of your garbage is diverting some of that garbage for recycling. And if everyone is buying into this type of, into recycling, it should bring the cost down, because at this point it's very cost prohibitive for a lot of commercial entities to be able to offer recycling. So that's one way we'd like to pressure the city to come up with better ideas.
And you know, it's interesting that there are a lot of ideas out there that could be, you know, brought forth in the public forum. You know, like the waste cooking oil, a lot of it can be regenerated and reused for diesel fuel.
And a lot of it is. There's the Bayou Vermilion District, again, at their restaurant, La Cuisine de Maman, they definitely send their used cooking oil for biofuel reuse. And
there's some big issues out there, like when you bring rice in from the field, you have to knock the covering off, and if you bring 100 pounds of rice in, 22 pounds of it is a waste material that's a biomass. And I don't know if we're using that very well. I think there's some electrical generation in Lake Charles with that product. Of course, you know, soybeans has a lot of the same type of waste.
Electrical generation, you mean they're burning it? Which
is steam generation.
Maybe not the best use, considering that the land needs to be replenished with that.
Yeah, the farmland desperately needs to be. If the term sustainability is going to fit into this, is it better to put that material, which is certainly compostable, back into the soil? Mm-hmm. And it needs to be tub ground, just like, you know, leaves and grass, and maybe that someone can figure a way to make money out of it, you know. But corn has an awful lot of waste. A lot of waste ends up in the field. It can be roll baled, it can be moved around. I look at the coastal restoration and the millions and billions of bushels of corn and you know, all over the country, and that organic material certainly could be used in a positive way, maybe in coastal restoration.
Yeah.
And the expense may not be worth it. But anyway, those are issues that ideas can make a difference. Like concrete now used to be all thrown away and it ended up in a lot of bad places along the bayou and everything.
And
Now
it's
that's
being
all
recycled.
reused.
Mhm.
It goes to operations that tug ground it and then back into gravel and it's.
You talked about coastal erosion. There is a man in New Orleans area who has a project called the Glassland Project, and he is using recycled, reclaimed glass as somehow a coastal restoration project. I don't have the details of his project, but you can definitely look that up. It's the Glassland Project and find more
So we
details.
come to an end. Catherine, thank you so much for being here, informing us, and we hopefully generated some ideas on you, the listeners' part. You may have some ideas that would contribute to no waste, and you might tell us where we meet and so forth again.
We're going to meet at the downtown Lafayette Public Library on March 15th, and that's going to be at 6 p.m. Come join us.
All right, thank you so much for being on the air.
Safety?
We have a few seconds left. So again, thank you for being here. I hope you've generated some ideas out there so we can reduce waste in the community.